Special bird guest Jay, talking Japan this week on The First to the Last, the Nerdom with Mike and Tom.
Nerd, special nerd, typo. Hey, Tom, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing fantastic.
Yes,
And
yes. Go
we
ahead.
have a guest.
We do.
We have a guest today, and Mike, it's your special guest. So let us know who we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So this is this week's episode. We're going to be talking about Japan from a special guest, Jay, who recently got back from there. And Jay is a fellow nerd, nerd of a fellow feather, and we're going to be talking about that here in a minute. But first, we're going to get into the usual weekly plugging, and we want to thank everybody. Oh, we'll hide behind the curtain there. Yeah. Well, this is the first last Nerdom with me, Mike, and my co-host Tom. And before we get into the main event there with our special interview show here today, I just wanted to say go check out our last few videos. We want to thank you for commenting, and subscribing. We actually picked up some views after I had a little mini drama there with the copyright thing with the the thing. I already covered it in another video, so we're not going to spend too much time on that at all. But the important thing is it's still up, so that's good. If it goes away, then we'll fix it. I'll redo it, recut it, or whatever. But yeah, also a shout out to Rosemary's Baby and a couple Nick Cage flicks that we covered not too long ago. But with that being said, we're going to get to the main event here, not dilly-dally too long. Jay, welcome to the show, and we thank you so much for coming on. And tell us, before we get into the finer points of the details, tell us about your what you like to nerd out on, what you like to, what your favorite things are.
Oh, hey, good evening, Mike and Tom. Thanks for having me. So yeah, like I said, my name is Jay. What I like to nerd on, let's see. I like manga, video games. I do some art book collecting. I like Rick and Morty, things like that.
Right.
Typical nerd stuff, you know.
And one of the things that since we're kind of focusing on Japan this year, or this episode, not this year, what hello, is I'm kind of curious. Obviously anime is like huge in their culture, manga,
Right.
anime. What was we could go around with each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
What
Go ahead.
was the first anime that you feasted your eyes on, and what got you hooked, and was that what opened your world to Japanese culture, but yeah, go ahead.
You want me to go ahead and go first?
Yeah, go ahead, Jay.
The first thing that I saw that was Japanese animation was probably maybe The Flying House or Superbook on like the Christian networks back in the day. Yeah. Voltron, another one. The first that I saw it, I knew it was Japanese, and I sought it out for that. Would have been Akira, the anime film version of that. And I don't think that's so much what got me interested in Japan, as I was already, the interest had already been there since I was probably 10, 11 years old. Okay. So it was just kind of like another thing that I learned about. It made me more interested in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Very cool. And you actually lived there for a little bit as well. So you have a unique perspective that most don't on that too as well, which is what we're going to get into here. You recently came back from Japan, right on?
Yeah, and I just wanted to qualify. I recently came back from a short little visit. I lived in Japan many years ago, so it's been a number of years since I've been there regularly. So I'm mainly just going to be talking about what I saw as a tourist, and maybe some things that might be a little different than when I lived in Japan many years ago.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, very cool. It's always cool to be able to talk to somebody who's actually lived in a completely different part of the world, especially one that has been growing more and more nowadays, for like where media is coming from. And of course, it's always come from there. Like we all have our little background, little history with a lot of cool things that came from there. Akira is one that we covered. Very cool. We also covered another anime too. Not too long ago as well. So it's definitely becoming more prevalent and more widespread. Of course, it was always widespread before we saw it, but it's cool to see that happen. So we gave you a little bit of your background, and I guess how was your last your trip? How'd that go?
Oh, it was great. Got to get back and do some things I hadn't done in a while, eat a lot of great food, ride on cool trains, see cool stuff. Yeah, it was really nice, just a very enjoyable time. Got to bring a little bit of swag back.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I wanted yeah, you got me a little a little
Right, yeah, the
what's
Batmobile, that's cool.
yeah, what was that bubble thing called? That it is called a specific thing. But anyway, it
Mm,
came in pieces, and you put it together like a little model kind of thing.
yeah, so the toys that come in, little goodies that come in the plastic bubbles, they're called gachapon or gashapon. It's like
Mhm.
a sound effect of like the crank being pulled and then it dropping
Ah.
into the receipt. Gasha pon. So it's just kind of like something that's everywhere. Like if you go anywhere in a major area where there's like a couple of feet of empty space, you might see one of these like a couple of machines outside of stores, or sometimes on floors of stores they have like a little corner with them where there's a coin machine where you can put yen notes in and get yen coins out and buy things. The price can be anywhere from like 100 yen up to, I saw like some jewelry gachapon machines where it was like 2,500 yen. So anywhere from like less than $1 up to around $20. And it's just kind of, it's legalized gambling basically. You put your money in and like there will be pictures on the display of what might be in there, but you really shouldn't put money in unless you're willing to get anything in that set, or you're just happy to keep feeding it until you get what you want, assuming that it's still left in the machine.
So it's sort of like expensive gumball machines like you have at the grocery store, right?
Right.
Sort of.
It's like it's a combination of that and loot boxes.
Yeah, yeah. I was watching one program where they were kind of going over Japanese stuff, and they were more on the end of the supernatural stuff. With but
Yeah.
they were talking about cursed gachapons where you could put in something and get the quote unquote cursed stuff out of it.
Yeah, it's like Gachapon. The great thing about it is like, so here, maybe someone has an idea for a small toy line, but it's just something very small, and maybe it's just very right now, and none of the Hasbros or Mattels, none of those companies are going to come in and support your idea. But the way these work, it seems like there are factories that can, you send them the schematics, they can get this stuff turned around relatively quickly back to you, that you then get stuck in you send to the places that are buying your product to put in the machines. They stick them in bubbles and you can have things out. It seems like probably in a relative matter of weeks. You have your initial print run, and when it's gone, it's gone. And
Hmm.
so there's always new contents for machines coming out. Sometimes the content of the machines will be kind of related to where you are. So if you're in like the Gai Otaku area, Akihabara, it's the
Hmm.
famous otaku district, you're going to
Hmm.
see a wide range of things. But maybe some of them will be more based on the types of things that the otaku guys are into. But if you go to Ikebukuro on the other side of Tokyo, on the other side of the Yamanote train line, probably 20 minutes, that's like the center for the lady otaku. And some of the machines you'll see will be the same, but you'll see some things that are based off of, say, anime or manga franchises that are, or television series that are popular with ladies as opposed to men. So
Hmm.
different places you see different mixes of products, and it's just kind of, it's very exciting, and it's to see some of the bizarre things you might find.
Hmm.
That's really
Yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sure.
really
Yeah. From very early on, not to take it in a different direction, but one of the big stories when we were first, because I'm a bit older than you guys, so my first anime was Speed Racer.
Oh
Uh,
wow, yeah.
Speed Racer, and of course we didn't know that was Japanese. And then the one that I truly fell in love with was Battle of the Planets. That was that was huge for me. G-Force was their I think Japanese title,
Yeah,
but
in Japan it was called Science Ninja Team Gatchaman.
yeah,
So
there you go.
yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Gatchaman. Yeah, yeah. So, so yeah, that was my big thing. Of course, I had no idea it was Japanese, but then later on, when Akira and Ghost in the Shell was making huge inroads, and everybody was talking about Japanese and Japanese culture, one of the big things was, um, they sell dirty girls' underwears in machines there. That was the big things.
Oh, right.
But yeah,
One of the
You want the
right.
lowdown on that?
yeah, go ahead.
So, I first went to Japan probably 20 years ago, and the rumors of these things. Best I can tell, these are something that some foreigner saw something, or maybe half remembered something they saw, and this kind of rumor spread. But this wasn't something legend, that would have been very common if it existed at all. But now, or at least I would say 10 to 15 years ago, you could have gone to the basement of some bookstore that sold adult things and they would have that machine, but it was more like, I believe, something that was made just because that urban myth already existed, like the myth of the American Express black card. That's a product that exists now because people kind of wanted it to exist.
Right, they willed it into existence.
Right.
It's not something you're going to see like on street corners. If they exist, if they're going to be in the basement of like kind of like adult stores
behind closed doors somewhere else.
Behind closed doors, exactly. Yeah, but like right on the street, that's not a thing you're going to see.
Yeah, and of course that was at the before the internet, or at the infancy of the internet. So yeah, it's sort of like with a lot of rumors. It just kind of, but yeah, at the beginning, when Akira came out, and we started getting some anime series, and they translated Akira was one of the first mangas that I was able to latch onto that came out through Marvel. And I was, stunned by it, and I was so hungry for anime and manga, but there just wasn't that much there. And so now that flash forward to today, where it's everywhere, everywhere, and it's outselling American comic books by leaps and bounds.
Yeah, it's funny too how it bleeds over with different genres too, like sci-fi and whatnot. Recently, thanks to Jay, I've got more into Gundam, as it were, and just kind of experiencing that whole thing. But there's like a whole other side to like different manga and different anime, and much follows a lot of lines, but more in the Japanese, catering to their audiences and their specialties. But there's also bleed over to here, and we keep seeing that with Marvel trying to do something, or DC trying to dip in, or whatever. It's just kind of funny how it's becoming more and more prevalent. As we adapt, and we kind of see the same old things over and over again. It's kind of nice to have new media, and Akira is awesome. Yeah, I mine had when I was a kiddo, when Nickelodeon was on, just kind of pop in with the history. There was that Mysterious Cities of Gold, one which I think was a French. It was French, but it had a lot of anime overlap, or stylized anyway. But I remember seeing that and loving it. And then later on, like you were saying, I kind of saw and seen different things, but it's just kind of funny how different things trend, and how it's taken over. But it's just not the same as like American comic books. We just keep getting, not to do commentary too much, but they just keep getting cheaper and cheaper, and going in different directions that aren't necessarily fan involved or centered, sometimes, but. Yeah. I think that's just kind of there's just so many different forms of media for people to pick and choose from.
Right. The cover price on American comic books aren't getting cheaper.
No,
going the opposite direction there. But you as far as it, I guess you're referring to the quality as far as the writing and maybe the art. But yeah, I mean, I think there's you could still find some diamonds in the rough out there, but yeah, it's not as It's definitely not a golden age.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Jay?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So American comics. So my dad was really into comics, and he had a huge like collection, those milk crates and milk crates full of comics. So when I was probably, I'd say maybe 10, 11-ish, I would read some of his comics, and there was a comic book store probably a half a mile away. So I'd walk there and I started getting my own comics. I mainly liked X-Men, but like I think by the time I was probably 17, 18, I was just out for a while, and I started getting into manga, and then I was just out of comics for it of all sorts really for a while. And then when I came back, I tried coming back to American comics, but what I found, the prices were high. I did not like that I'd coming on a story and authors and artists would change, or the storyline would just be revamped. That didn't work for me. I like the idea, like, I don't have a problem with the idea that like there's like a status quo of some sort that resets at the end of an issue. So if you're just going to do like episodic issues, this is what happened, this was the adventure, and at the end the day was saved, or maybe there's a 2-parter or a 3-parter, that's fine, do that. But and then if you want to do a serialized story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, do that. But the sort of hybrid approach that American comics kind of like to do very cynically sometimes. And when I say American comics, I primarily mean Marvel, DC, and these days maybe quite a bit more Marvel than DC. But just not giving the customer, the reader, an opportunity to really kind of have something, either a new adventure every time, or give people an opportunity to invest in something. Give us one or the other, but don't give us a little bit of both, because then nobody's happy.
Then you get the worst of all worlds. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and that's contrast very differently from my understanding from you and from Tom, and things that we have covered a little bit of manga here and there, but there are so many deep storylines that are already in full swing, or they've already concluded, but there's just so much voluminous material that you can get into. It really is cool. Like I know we kind of share a little bit over, like I mean to get into it eventually, but there's that one long running series. I don't know if it's still going on, but the Berserk one, as one to name, that has appeal to also European audiences, not just U.S. But it's kind of it's funny how what's quality stands the test of time, and the vast majority, and I've said this before, of all media, regardless of whatever it is mostly just okay at best. You know, most of it nobody remembers, but there's a few cream rises to the top, unfortunately. Some years and trends just don't have that as much, but there's a lot of back catalog stuff if you want to get into anime or manga. It's really good. That's all over the map. And we were having this conversation too about just different, like if you're into more military sci-fi like I am, there's also manga for that. There's like that kind of thing, and some of it's more fantasy. Could also be space-based, but it's always cool to see those. Like I was saying before, it kind of goes back to the one point I was making, which is there's overlap. There's different genre mixing, just like they have here. Like for horror that we've covered several of those films lately. Like there's horror sci-fi, like Aliens. It's kind of cool to see new things come out. And I think Netflix. What's your opinion on Netflix and some of they seem to be a lot more. They seem to be embracing anime very successfully in general. What do you think about that, Tom and Jay?
I think that Netflix they wanted to be into anime, but they did not quite get it early on. But I think that they're finally starting to get it and get what audiences are actually interested in. So what you're starting to see is more Amazon sort of picking up the rights to broadcast things, or picking up concepts that they think they actually think there's an audience for, rather than just kind of picking up something that's pitched to them so that they can say, we have anime and this is gory and bloody, so this is what we want on our service. Like, for example, there's actually an excellent series right now called Pluto that is streaming on Netflix. It's 8 one-hour episodes. It covers this entire manga series by an incredible manga author named Naoki Urasawa. It's based on an old Astro Boy story arc. It's like a psychological thriller, sci-fi murder mystery.
Cool.
I think that's something that it had been in development hell for a while, and I'm guessing that Netflix's money probably helped to get it finalized. And it's not lighting Netflix up, but it was never going to. There's a very specific type of person or a couple of very specific types of people who are going to be interested in it. So I think that Netflix is actually doing a pretty decent job of doing targeted marketing. If you're the type of person who's going to like it, there's a good chance it's just going to pop up in your recommendations. If not, there's a good chance you're going to hear about it from someone you do know or some source that you follow on social media or the internet. But as a whole, I think the Netflix's anime catalog is starting to fill out, and I watch some stuff on Netflix from time to time. They're not my primary source to watch anime. That would be Crunchyroll, but that's just because Crunchyroll gets a lot more of current things that are airing this season,
directly from like in the now, currently, not from 10 or 15 years ago or 5.
Right.
It's current. That's cool. Yeah. And that's just it just goes to show that the consumer has many different ways if they want to even stream different media. They're going to find a way.
Yeah, I think me and Mike, we discussed Vinland Saga. That's on Netflix. It's pretty good.
It is good.
And then I don't have Crunchyroll. I've thought about it, but Hulu has such a good catalog of anime as well. I've been kind of dipping in there, and I got caught up. I saw the original Full Metal Alchemist, the first run of it, and then they redid it with truly adapting the manga. And I think it's called Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Yes, that's the full adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that one I really enjoyed, and I'm caught up until the last episode of Attack on Titan. I'm excited to see the final episode.
That's a big one.
I have heard nothing but good things about that particular series. That's one that will pop up occasionally that I added to the list of things. But and I know that there's the influence of the style is also being very big and popular too nowadays. Especially, we just talked about it offline a little bit with Invincible 2, that has certain kind of hallmarks or callbacks to that sort of. It's not directly one for one, but it's definitely inspired. At least the artistic work is unique and interesting anyway, which is not something you can always say with newer, wholly owned American properties. Just in general, I'm just speaking in general.
Yeah, Well, Invincible, its art style is really based off of Ryan Ottley, his artwork for the comic book, but I'm sure Ryan was influenced by the clean line work of manga. But go ahead, Jay.
I was going to say, I think Invincible, it's interesting that you brought up Invincible, because I think that right now is probably the best American equivalent to the way that anime works. So the way that so there are a couple different types of ways that anime is made. The most common is there is a manga. There's a comic that's serializing in a magazine or has serialized in a magazine, and the publisher and other parties want to promote this story because they think it's a way that they can make money. The publisher thinks, I can draw attention to my magazines and I can sell more volumes. And the mangaka, the manga creator also, hey, this could sell me more volumes because people watch this and then want to buy volumes.
Right.
There are toy companies that might think, hey, these characters are attractive, or they do something cool and we can make merchandise based off of them. There will be a music company involved that's going to do the introduction and closing themes as a way to promote the artists in their stable, the musicians, musical artists in their stable. So that's how one way it's made. Another is when the story is based off of what's called a light novel. Light novels are a type of Japanese easy reading. They often tend to be like more pulpy stories you might call it the rough equivalent of YA literature here in the United States, like just written at a simpler level. even though here in the States, the majority of people reading YA are actually adults. It's mainly adult females, I believe, who read YA here in the States. There are different demographics for different types of light novels in Japan, but often for the same reason, to promote the novel, an anime will be made. And then the third case would be there's someone has an original idea, and they can get enough sponsors together to be able to get their original idea turned into an anime. But long story short, Invincible kind of exists as a way to get people to watch the story and possibly go buy volumes of Invincible. And when that first season aired, you saw the sales of those omnibuses go up quite a bit. They were selling as well as some of the better selling manga at one point, and I imagine we'll see another spike in sales, although maybe not as big this coming because of the season that's just started. So it's based on the story that has a beginning, middle, and end. There's been very little major deviation from the original Invincible story in this animation, because sometimes Japanese stories, people think this doesn't happen, but sometimes there will also be minor changes and alterations for the anime because they think something flows better, or that's an element that maybe just doesn't play well on television, or maybe there's even some type of sort of unspoken rule that you don't put this thing on television. So there might be a slight change made to the anime, but anime tend to be 99% faithful. I think Invincible is a 99% faithful adaptation of that comic, and I think that's one of the reasons that it's successful, and it's adapting something with a beginning, middle, and end. So people are eventually going to get to see the end of this story one way or the other, be it through the animation if they make it that far, or if they choose to go read the original comic.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it was exciting because they started putting out those omnibuses, and I guess they knew that the series was coming out, so they started putting out those omnibuses. And I was reading those because I'd never read the story before. I just thought it was just a kind of generic superhero story, and then I found out no, it's not, and I started reading it, and I became hooked. And by the end of the series, I heard the comics. I heard about the animated series coming out. I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta watch it, and I was like pumping it up to my coworkers and stuff. It's like, you gotta see it.
That what you just described, Justin, is something that is unique there. The way that they used to do things here in America, like a long time ago, where there would actually be natural, like old school marketing, and also have that natural feedback loop from the fans to the creator to the, there's that natural. Whereas we're kind of missing that a little bit in the streaming era, and it's good to see where it is captured and it is used to great success, because it just is very simple equation. It's just making something that is cool and then successfully adapting it to a new media, and then having people come and return to it and being satisfied. I'm no different, and I believe Jay. I believe we also share that in the background too, just in general, just being normal nerds. Kind of trading back. And I definitely, the other thing too, I think is a hallmark of a lot of properties that are good and successful are ones like where you have nerds on YouTube, and we're all no strangers here to YouTube. We all use it. We're on it right now. All that good stuff. So whether it's on the end of the creator end, or just people nerding out and creating lore videos on different characters and different powers and power scaling, kind of the same thing that you would normally do from it's just something that's cool. People like to talk about it, and it's just it's awesome to have that once in a while, especially with Invincible for sure.
Be on the lookout. Scott Pilgrim is getting an actual anime adaptation soon, and it's looking pretty faithful as far as the art style. They got for the dub, the English dub, they got the original movie cast back in their entirety to come work on that. So, and it also, surprise, Oni Press happens to be putting out 2 hardcover box sets around this time. One is going to be a original black and white box set, because the original comic was in black and white. The second box set will be the same thing, but it'll be the color volume. So they're even giving people the option: do you want to read this in black and white or color? Because I've never been into Scott Pilgrim hugely. I've read a bit of it, but my understanding is some people they read it very early on, and they're used to the black and white version. Some people read it in the subsequent years after a colorized version had been introduced. So different people are going to want different versions of that, but just keep an eye. If you go on Amazon and you look at sales numbers, or go on to ICV2 and look at their monthly sales charts, don't be surprised if at some point after that series starts airing that you start seeing a little bit of an increase in the sales of those volumes. I don't think it'll be as pronounced as Invincible, because Scott Pilgrim, I think it's got a kind of a much more specific audience that's going to be interested in that, primarily consisting of people who read the story or around the age that you might have read the story when that first came out in the early 2000s. So millennial-aged people. I don't know how that's going to resonate with Gen Zers or anyone younger than that, because it's very much a product of its times, whereas Invincible has a more sort of timeless feel to it. It could be happening anytime in the last 20, 30 years. So, but I expect that Scott Pilgrim's going to see a little bit of a boost in sales because of the authenticity of this adaptation.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was going to say about that. Like it's also, like you were saying, it's a basic formula, time, plus also like how that generation took it. It is definitely a generational thing. And that's, I think you also see that too with like more modern things like Ahsoka. Like you had your Clone and your Rebels fans, and those folks, that's their world. Anybody who likes that, they show up for it. There's definitely different give and take with that. But I agree. It sounds like Invincible might be just a little bit bigger, but it is cool to see that still exists and they still get that.
Maybe if there's a bump in as far as Scott Pilgrim, maybe our episode we did on Scott Pilgrim we'll get some more views if everybody gets more interested in it. But yeah, to loop back to one of the things Jay said about the magazines. The one I know about is Shonen Jump, the weekly magazine, and I like how with Shonen Jump, it's instead of like comic books in America, it's like a magazine with various stories. And the way I understand it, and Jay, you could correct me if I'm wrong, they'll have the main story, which is like One Piece or something that's been around forever, that's real popular. But then they have like backup stories that they're trying out new storylines, and if one of them catches fire, it'll get bumped up and get more pages and maybe become the spotlight.
Ride that wave.
But yeah, ride the wave. And I like how it's the audience telling the magazine what they like, as opposed to the magazine telling the audience what they're going to like.
Right. You're pretty close. So I just first want to qualify that different magazines have different editorial teams, and they have different standards about how much time they give series to build an audience, or how much they take into account the fan surveys that are included with each sold magazine and each online sold magazine. Different magazines have different sort of criteria, but Shonen Jump is the one that we know the most about here, and therefore we often tend to believe that every magazine is like Shonen Jump. That's like believing every basketball league is like the NBA. Like,
true.
Shonen Jump is the biggest manga magazine in the world in Japan. It has the highest circulation. It's been the most popular magazine for probably the last 20 to 30 years.
Wow.
Just getting published in Shonen Jump is an honor of sorts. It meant that, there was a sort of belief that you had what it took to potentially have like this big landmark mainstream product. But the reality is that more than 50% of series will be canceled. A lot of things don't make it more than about half a year in the magazine. You have a relatively short period of time to kind of get people interested and build an audience that is willing to say good things about you. The first test is how well your first volume sells. Shonen Jump, the editorial board sets like a certain number of volumes they expect for each given series based on just what they expect of it. If you don't hit your sales numbers, you're kind of on the chopping block, and you have a very short period of time to kind of recover and maybe have good second volume sales, or they'll cut you and they'll tell you, hey, it's time to wrap up. They'll cut you, and then they bring in another slew of series, and those series get the chance to make it. And some 25 years ago, One Piece was a brand new series. It was not from a name author. It was not guaranteed success, but the editorial board thought highly of it, and it built a fan base, and it became the top story in the magazine off and on. It's always been at the top of the magazine for the last 25 years. It wasn't always on the cover or the most popular series in the magazine, but it has an enduring popularity. Right now, the other big series in Shonen Jump are My Hero Academia, Jujutsu Kaisen, Sakamoto Days. Those are, I think, probably the big 4 series in the magazine right now. Then you have some sort of like mid-card series that are doing respectable numbers. They're getting to keep going. And then you have some series that are towards the bottom that are probably weeks from wrapping up unless they make a major change and develop a bigger audience. But there are some magazines that are more forgiving. They look more at sales than they do the survey, the reader surveys. There are others that just give series just a little bit more time to develop a fan base. So maybe you'll get 9 months or a year before they ask you to call it a day, or whereas another magazine might just you're only planning on doing 12 chapters, so they give you your 12 weeks and then you wrap up, and maybe you work on something different next or something like that. So it depends on the magazine. But Shonen Jump is a very mainstream, very popular magazine, and it thrives on the fact that every few weeks you're going to open it up and there's going to be a new story. That's part of the appeal of the magazine. And the stories that just aren't interesting to most people, they tend to wrap up relatively quickly because they don't make it.
If only we had a more efficient process like that for certain properties. But that's okay. That they'll figure it out eventually, maybe.
I think we have one built in. Just that Marvel doesn't, in particular, just doesn't stick with anything very long. I don't read a lot of current comics that are for Marvel DC. What I do read is mainly from the indies, but it seems like what Marvel does a lot is it's like, oh, this is going to be a 4-issue limited series. This is going to be a 6-issue limited series. This is going to be a 12-issue limited series. So like, even if something was amazing, it doesn't always get the opportunity. The other thing is that American comics are on kind of like because of the final order call system and the way our distribution system works, comics are already on sort of like a 3-month delay as far as response. By the time the first issue comes out, its sales are already sort of determined based on what the comic shops ordered 3 months ago. So I think it's actually a lot harder for a series to really kind of make a mark and build a fan base unless you have like an indie publisher that's willing to give things a little bit more time before they tell the author to call it a day.
Yeah, I think, and Tom and I kind of circled around, like one of the number one, I think, storylines I think that has been quality was the Transformers one. I think at some point we'll circle back around that for like modern day ones that are at least sticking out. That I've heard some people talk like we're not talking about widespread appeal here. We're just talking about like people who have an interest in it. Like they're like, hey, if you see this, then it's kind of word of mouth, like it was, like oftentimes are.
Well, Robert Kirkman, not to get too far off on a tangent on U.S. comics, but yeah, I mean, Marvel and DC are going through growing pains as far as sales, and they are trying to figure it out again. And I think they kind of are trying to reevaluate things. But yeah, as far as indie comics, Robert Kirkman, who did Invincibles and Walking Dead and all of that, but yeah, he's his Skybound Comics, his company within Image, have latched on the properties of Transformers and G.I. Joe, and he's treating it with respect as opposed to just getting whatever name brand something or other to do it. with Transformers, he's got a guy that really loves it. Um, there, Warren,
Daniel Warren Johnson.
yeah. He's
He
one of my
did do a
favorite.
power bomb. He is awesome.
Powerbomb, yeah, absolutely. He's kind of got his art style reminds me of Paul Pope, but he is very much kind of that kinetic manga kind of
Yes,
vibe to it,
absolutely.
which I love. And then with like G.I. Joe, he's got the the guy that wrote it back in the 80s, Larry Hama, writing it, which is, you know, fan favorite. The fans love that guy. So yeah, he's trying to do cater towards the fans with this. And yeah, I read the first issue of Transformers, and obviously I love the art, but
Right.
in the story's kind of basic, but yeah, what are you expecting with the Transformers?
Right. Within reason. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's just good to have good titles to go back to. And we
Yeah,
we,
and like Jay said, Powerbomb, give that lots of props. That wrestling comic book, it's awesome.
that's what I've
It's
heard.
good for people who like wrestling. It's good for, honestly, I feel like when people are like, they're manga folks and they're looking to maybe try to find a comic that they're going to read, that's one I recommend. It's a self-contained 1-volume story. It's got this very kinetic Japanese style art to it. The action has weight and it feels like it has consequences. His colorist was excellent. The story is good. It's not the most amazing story I've ever read, but it was a good story that paired well with the art. And really, that's, I think, what's most important, having art that is appropriate for the type of story that you're trying to tell.
Yeah, and he's great. When he's worked with Marvel and DC, he's retained his style and his way he tells the story. With Marvel, he did a limited series of Beta Ray Bill, which is the alien Thor, and then with DC, he did Wonder Woman, Dead Earth. Both series are highly recommended. Yeah, great stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. And we'll have a lot of these in the show notes here. Should anybody have any things, but these are definitely like I like to say, we don't really do reviews per se, but we do recommendations, and we do like to pass along things. Anything that can be, like I said, like that couple folks would gather around and nerd out on. Like that's kind of the point of finding good stuff and passing it along, because it's just nice. It's just nice because it helps you there's just so many things out there that you can watch or pay attention to. It's just nice to have a shorter list of things that you can pivot into, especially if you have overlap with interest and likes, and just never mind that, just quality.
Yeah, because there's that Netflix malaise whenever you're kind of looking for something to watch, and you find yourself just kind of clicking through it for an hour and then going, I don't have time to watch anything now. And you just kind of go on. So one of the benefits I think of our channel is that we spotlight some of the things, and for what we discuss of it, maybe that'll inspire someone to watch it or say, hey, that kind of sounds like something that would be my jam. But to get it kind of back to Japan, one of the things I like to do, especially before the dreaded COVID, was watch IRL streamers like on Twitch. There's a couple of people I watched that lived in Japan, Americans that lived in Japan that would just get out every night and just walk the streets and would have fun on the streets of Japan. And that really kind of got me, because before that all I had was playing Yakuza, and I didn't think that walking down the streets of Japan, you wouldn't just launch into a fight with a gang or anything. So but that kind of gave me a closer glimpse. But then, like, I think about a month ago or a couple weeks ago, there was that one streamer. I think his name is Johnny Somali.
Oh, Johnny
Somali.
Yeah.
I was kind of curious your take on IRL streamers, if you've watched any or not, Jay, or if you had contemplated maybe becoming an IRL streamer in Japan.
No. So to be an IRL streamer in Japan, I'd have to go back to Japan and be there regularly, and I'm not prepared to do that at this point in my life. But I've watched some of those, and they can be really enjoyable. There'll be times if I'm working from home, I'll have one of those on in the background where someone's just kind of walking around. Right. I did a little bit of like filming while I was walking around there, and actually just kind of walking around the neighborhoods and seeing different things, the sort of mundane things about life in Japan. I think that's what's interesting to me. I didn't go to buy lots of action figures or lots of comics or find rare video games or any of that. I just kind of went to sort of be there. I got a couple of little really cool things, but I was really mainly there just to sort of be there.
Kind of soak up the ambiance, right?
Your Johnny Somalis of the world, unfortunately, he's just the most name brand one right now, but there are several like him, and it's unfortunate. You just got some people who, when you've got a place that's a destination that lots of people want to go, that people are going and enjoying, it's like I liken it to like a kind of a commons, and there's just always that one person who has to go and take a shit in the commons because they can. And it's he's another addict and slave to the attention economy. Someone who's just really is desperate for people to pay attention to him. And there's no such thing as bad press as long as he's being mentioned. I think I read that like they had some of the charges dropped, and there's maybe something else going on. He's someone I wouldn't mind seeing the Japanese government kind of throw the book at, just to kind of set an example so that other people understand that this is not something that's permissible in the country. Normal. It's one thing to be just be somewhere and be new and be kind of dumb and not know how things work. It's another thing to intentionally run afoul of the law and of customs just to get a rise out of people and be a shock jock, be a Tom Green sort of person, you know.
Yeah, that's the funny thing is I and that's one of the other YouTube channels that we recommended that will cover Atozi is what I'm talking about. He'll just kind of he didn't really have, I mean, he's kind of an everyman, I guess, kind of take on things, and he kind of explains to some of the, the what's the latest soap opera is or whatever the latest thing is that he likes to cover, but he's done pretty good on that. And I've lived vicariously through, like, periodically. Well, if you're online, fortunately, none of us are all, or what as the kids call it, terminally online, but definitely connected into the big fat pipe enough to get a little bit of sewage through. Once in a while, as it were, or whatever the latest soap opera is. Definitely, he's definitely in the cringe corner material. Like when we would highlight that once in a while. Tom, if you're not familiar, Jay, our cringe corner was like some stupid YouTube or some beef or some silly thing that just went over the line to be just 100% cringe. and Johnny Somali is one of them, for sure. Like without even trying.
Yeah. We also had the Scorn of Gorn, where
that's right.
We had the Gorn from Star Trek. You would get the Scorn from him, but yeah, no, there's like the bottom basement streamers, like the IP2 crowd that are just the cancer of the internet. But yeah, there's if you dig deep enough, you'll uncover the bad stuff wherever you look. But yeah. I
was just gonna say about recommendations, and you guys had mentioned a couple Powerbomb, and some other ones that we kind of we'll have those in the show notes down below in a little bit for sure.
I was gonna say that I initially was really into anime and manga, and I've kind of stayed interested in it throughout my life, but it hasn't been like the focus of what I kind of dug into. At different points, I've focused more on maybe American comic books, or I was big into horror movies. I've kind of gone through different phases, but I've always really loved live action Japanese movies or series. My favorite is, and you're probably familiar with him, Jay, Takashi Miike. He's my god. and just recently, as in the past maybe 7 years, I really have gotten into. I probably mispronounce his name, but Sion Sono. He's really great too. I could pull. He did there's uh, a movie. I think it's on Netflix, or it was called Tag, that he did. But the big one that I'm thinking about. Let me see if I can find it. But yeah, he's similar to Takashi Miike. His big one. Crap. Where am I going? He did do a suicide. What was it called? Uh, Oh, Suicide Club. Suicide Club. He did that one. That one was the big one that kind of brought him a big success. And but yeah, he's really, and the one that really got me interested in him was a movie called Why Don't You Play in Hell? That one's really good too.
Very
But
cool.
yeah, he's kind of got the same vibe as Takashi Miike, in that, every one of his movies different from the last one. One of them was one of my favorites of his is called Guilty of Romance, which is basically a twisted love community where he's taking pictures of girls upskirts.
Wow.
It also pulls in a lot of religious thoughts and themes and discussions, and it's a 3-hour movie
Wow.
that took me through the ringer as far as the different things that he goes over. I couldn't really put it into just a handful of words. It's one of
Summary.
those movies that you kind of have to see it to believe it.
An experience for sure. It sounds like
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I really enjoy the diversity of things that live action uh, Japanese filmmakers do. I'm sure they're inspired by their animated counterparts. As an anime, they have to kind of bring the action or the level of interest that much higher, because of all the action that happens in anime. But there's a kinetic energy that I truly love about live action Japanese cinema.
Right on. Right. Awesome. Awesome. Do you have any? I think we're coming up here to the thing. Was there any other things you wanted to share, Jay, or make recommendations for somebody who would be more curious to jump into manga, or is there like a website or something like that kind of gives a general purpose feel for like what's out there, or anything along those lines, or just from your experience that folks tend to gravitate toward that you would recommend?
Oh, no, I think that there was a time where there were just like a limited number of venues that people got in through. They got in through watching Akira. They got in through watching Cowboy Bebop. They got in through watching
Right.
Evangelion. But like now, there's a lot of different venues into anime. There's people who are into history who get into anime through
True.
Golden Kamuy or through Vinland Saga. There are people who are in romance who get into anime through series like Kaguya-sama Wants to Be Confessed To. There's just so many different venues because there's just so much more anime available in English now.
ecosystem.
So really, what I always tell people is like, what's your frame of reference? What's something you've watched? Doesn't have to be anime, doesn't have to be anything Japanese. What's something recently that you've enjoyed, or what's something that you really like? And that's usually, I take it from there and make suggestions.
Yeah, I'm big into horror, so my god as far as manga is Junji Ito.
Great.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Awesome. Well, I want to thank you, Jay. We're rolling up here in about a little under an hour, but I don't want to keep you for too long. But we do appreciate it. We'd love to have you back on to talk about anything of note or significance that you want to cover, or not, or whatever. But it would be great to maybe in the future have you back on. But I do thank
That
you
would
for
be awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah, we've kind of barely scraped the surface on this topic.
Right.
I agree.
It's such a huge, and maybe on a future episode we might drill it down to a certain aspect, or maybe we focus on a movie or a series that you're into. Maybe we can watch it beforehand or read it beforehand and kind of focus in it. And also our audience, we don't want to forget them. If you have a suggestion out there, give it in our comments down below. Say hello to Jay, and we enjoyed having Jay.
Yeah, it was great having you guys, or being here, and thank you guys for having me. Have a good evening and take care of yourselves, everyone.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you. And,
too.
And with that, we're going to do the outro.
See you guys.
See ya.
Thank you for joining us this week. We will be off the next 2 weeks for the holidays. This